I could feel the eyes on me as I stepped out of the car, but I didn't flinch. It was the kind of silence that spoke louder than any words could. Those quiet gasps, the disbelief, and the shame that followed. I could almost hear their thoughts. What is she doing here? How did she get that car? But none of them knew the real story. Not one of them knew the truth. I'm Chloe Evans, 32, a marketing executive at one of the top firms in the city. I make 6 figures a year and I've worked my ass off to get here. But to the people at that wedding, I was just that girl, the one who never quite fit in, the one they thought would always be on the outside looking in. You see, I had spent the entire day listening to the whispers. The way they looked me up and down when I walked in, eyes flicking over my outfit, not with admiration, but with judgment. A lowly, faded dress that didn't scream expensive, with shoes that didn't have the brand name they'd expected to see. But I was fine with it. I didn't need their validation anymore. Not after all these years. The thing is, they had no idea. They didn't know the half of it. The version of me they saw today wasn't even the tip of the iceberg. What they didn't realize is that I wasn't that girl anymore. And as I stood there, in the middle of the crowd, feeling the weight of their silent judgment, I couldn't help but smile to myself, because I was about to show them just how wrong they were. And they would never forget this moment. It wasn't always like this. In fact, just a few years ago, I would have been the last person you'd expect to pull up in a Rolls Royce. Back then, I wasn't even someone people noticed. Not in a good way, at least. I was the invisible one. The one you could forget, the one you could look past. I remember those family gatherings, the ones where everyone seemed to have something to talk about, something to share. But when it was my turn to speak, it was like I wasn't even there. I'd tell them about my day, about the struggles, the little wins, but it was always the same reaction. Distant smiles, empty nods. No one really cared. They'd glance at their phones or make side conversations, tuning me out without a second thought. "Are you still working at that place?" My cousin Leah would ask, her voice dripping with passive aggression. I mean, it's fine if you're happy with that, but, don't you want more? More. Like, it was so simple to just ask for more. But to them, I was just a girl working her way up in a corporate world that was too big for me. They didn't see the hours I put in, the sacrifices, the dreams I had. To them, I was just the quiet one who wouldn't make it far. And it wasn't just family. It was the friends, too. The ones who'd smile in your face, but talk about you behind your back. I can still hear Jessica's voice in my head, laughing with the others after I turn my back. She really thinks she can compete with us. Doesn't she get it? She's not cut out for this. It hurt. A lot. But I couldn't show it. I had to pretend like it didn't. I had to laugh along with them to shrink into the background because being invisible was better than being ridiculed. Then there was Ethan. We dated for almost a year, and I thought things were finally falling into place. But he had a way of making me feel small, insignificant. When we'd go out to dinner with his friends, it was like I didn't even matter. The way he'd talk over me or ignore my opinions, it was all so subtle, but the message was clear. I wasn't enough. Maybe you should wear something a little more glamorous. He'd say, to keep up with the crowd. Glamorous! I couldn't afford that. But even if I could, that's not who I was. And that was the problem, wasn't it? They wanted me to fit into their image of what success looked like: expensive clothes, fancy vacations, a life of luxury. But I wasn't that. I was the girl who worked late nights, who didn't have time for the designer labels. And to them, that was my downfall. I used to cry about it. A lot. I'd lock myself in my room and just let the tears fall. I felt invisible, unwanted, and dismissed. Like, no matter how hard I worked or how much I achieved, I was never going to be seen as good enough. But slowly, quietly, something inside of me started to change. The hurt, the rejection, it wasn't something I wanted to carry anymore. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need to fit into their mold. And that's when I made the decision to stop waiting for them to see me. I was going to make them notice, but on my terms. So I started working harder. I pushed myself. I spent nights reading, networking, learning. I didn't have the luxury of joining their social circles or wearing their brand names, but I had something they didn't: drive. And I knew deep down that I was going to show them one day, and they wouldn't even recognize me when that day came. They didn't see it coming. And frankly, I didn't care. No one noticed the quiet hours I spent working after the world went to bed, or the long weekends where I turned down invitations because I was too focused on getting ahead. I didn't post it on social media. I didn't need applause. I had my eyes on the prize. It wasn't about what they thought of me. It wasn't about fitting in anymore. I wasn't going to make it by their standards. I was going to make it by mine, and I did. I started climbing the ladder at work, quietly at first. I wasn't the loudest voice in the room, and I didn't feel the need to compete for attention. But I did the work. I brought fresh ideas, and I did everything with precision, with focus. They noticed me eventually, though. I was promoted quickly, one step after another, but it wasn't just about career advancement. I was also building my own financial independence, the kind of independence that wouldn't rely on anyone's approval. I put everything I had into smart investments, real estate, stocks. Slowly, over the years, I built a foundation. No flashy announcements, no look at me moments, just quiet, steady growth. I wasn't showing off, but I was proving something to myself. I remember sitting in my small apartment on the weekends, planning my next move. Every cent I earned was going toward my future, even if no one could see it. It was just me and my goals. Then came the moment that everything changed. I was sitting in a conference room at work, a boardroom full of people waiting for me to present my proposal. I was in my early 30s now, but the doubts, the rejections, and the fears from all those years ago were still fresh in my mind. But I had something they didn't: confidence. When I walked into that room, the same people who once overlooked me were suddenly paying attention. I stood tall, spoke with authority, and delivered a proposal that changed the direction of the company. It was a gamble, but I'd spent enough time analyzing the market and trends to know that it would work, and it did. That was the moment I realized that I had the power. Not just the power to succeed, but the power to shape my own destiny. I had grown in ways that no one expected. I didn't need to wear designer labels to prove my worth. I didn't need to go to their parties or attend their gatherings. I had my own life now, one built on hard work, determination, and a refusal to be seen as anything less than capable. But they didn't know that yet. The moment was coming. The moment when all their dismissive stares, all their whispered comments, would come crashing down on them. I wasn't just that girl anymore. I wasn't the one who sat quietly in the corner. I had built something, and they were going to see it. I could feel the tension rising in me as I thought about the wedding. It was the perfect opportunity. It was time to show them just how much I'd changed. The wedding was a beautiful affair, but nothing could have prepared them for what was about to happen. I knew I wasn't what they expected to see. Not in the dress I wore, not in the car I had arrived in. I could feel the awkwardness in the air as I entered the venue, all eyes on me, but no one said a word. I didn't say a word either. I stood tall, quietly scanning the room, watching the group of people who once mocked me, judging me from the corner of their eyes. I could see them trying to hide their surprise, but I saw it. It was in the subtle shift of their posture, the way they stopped talking mid-sentence, the flicker of confusion in their eyes. They were all thinking the same thing. What is she doing here? The wedding was filled with people from my past. Friends who had slowly drifted away over the years. Family members who once thought I wasn't enough to be a part of their world, but I wasn't there to prove anything to them anymore. I was there because I could be. I hadn't come to seek approval. I hadn't come to show them how far I'd come. No, I came because I could walk into that room and not care about what anyone thought. And that was the power I gained. The woman at the entrance greeted me, her eyes lingering on my dress before quickly shifting to my face with a forced smile. I gave her a polite nod and moved past, making my way through the crowd. The usual suspects were there. My cousin Leah, her perfectly manicured nails, her ever-present smile that never quite reached her eyes. Jessica, standing with a group of women, her laughter carrying over the music. And Ethan, the man who had once been my everything but was now just another face in the crowd. They all looked at me, but they didn't say anything. They didn't know what to say. I didn't even look their way, though I could feel the weight of their stares. Instead, I walked toward the bar, ordering a drink with calm professionalism. I didn't need to make a scene. I didn't need to rub anything in their faces. The truth was, The success I built was the last thing they were expecting from me. They didn't know how I'd achieved it, and they didn't care. But soon they wouldn't have a choice. Minutes later, the event's host, a woman from my old circle of acquaintances, walked up to the microphone, her voice filling the room. "We are so grateful to have everyone here today. And now I would like to take a moment to introduce someone who's played a pivotal role in our industry, someone we all admire, Chloe Evans." It wasn't a loud announcement. It didn't have the fanfare of a red carpet entrance. But it was enough for them to know that this was not the girl they had once known. I stood taking a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel the shift in the air, the uncertainty, the curiosity, the sudden awareness. They were watching me. This time they weren't looking through me. They were looking at me, and I didn't need to say anything. I walked toward the front, greeted by polite applause. The sound of their applause a little too late, a little too uncertain. I could feel their eyes burning into my back as I took the stage. It was surreal standing there, but I held my composure. I didn't need to shout or demand attention. All I needed was to be present. The host handed me the microphone, and I could hear a sharp intake of breath from the crowd. I wasn't here to brag, to remind them of my past, or to show them how far I'd come. I was here to own the moment. I smiled, nodded in gratitude to the crowd, and without uttering a single word of the story they all thought they knew, I went about my business. The event was mine to lead, my presence commanding the room without needing to say anything at all. They didn't need to know the details. They didn't need to hear how far I'd come. The simple truth was that they had underestimated me, and that was my victory. And as I stood there with everyone now quietly paying attention, I realized one thing. I'd finally become the woman I was meant to be, with or without their approval. After the event ended, the evening continued with forced smiles and polite conversations. But I could feel the eyes still on me. There was an unease in the air, like everyone was trying to figure out how to process the fact that I wasn't the girl they had once known. And that's when it started quiet whispers at first, and then the inevitable approach. Leah was the first to come up to me. She had that look on her face, the one that said she was trying to be kind, but there was something else there too, something laced with guilt. We didn't realize just how far you've come, Chloe, she said, her voice soft but filled with a strange mixture of surprise and hesitation. I nodded, not giving her the satisfaction of an immediate response. There was no need for me to be angry with her, but I wasn't in the mood for pity either. She shifted uncomfortably, her eyes flicking to the floor. "I'm sorry if I ever made you feel overlooked. Overlooked. That was putting it mildly. But I wasn't here to rehash the past. It wasn't her apology I wanted. What I needed, what I deserved, was to stand on my own terms, without validation from the people who had once made me feel small. I've moved past all that," I said quietly, my tone calm but firm. "I don't need an apology. I just needed time to prove to myself what I was capable of. That's all." Leah opened her mouth to say something more, but I turned away, feeling my patience begin to wear thin. She wasn't the one I needed to confront. Ethan was. I found him a few minutes later, standing with a drink in hand, clearly unsure of what to do with himself. His gaze met mine, and for a moment, I could see the recognition in his eyes, the realization that the girl he had once dismissed was standing before him, transformed into someone entirely different. "Chloe," he said, his voice careful, measured. "You look different?" In a good way, I smiled, but it wasn't a smile of warmth. It was one of quiet power, the kind that said more than words ever could. "Thank you, Ethan," I replied, my voice steady. "I've worked hard for it. I'm glad for you, really. It's just ... I didn't expect to see you here like this. It's impressive. Impressive." He had always been the kind of person who didn't see my worth until it was too late. But I didn't need his praise anymore. "I didn't need you to expect anything," I said, my voice a little sharper than I intended. "I needed you to believe in me, and you didn't." His face flushed, but instead of the anger I once might have expected from him, there was just ... nothing. He couldn't deny the truth, and it left him speechless. "I know that now," he muttered, his voice tinged with regret, but I didn't want to hear it. I'm glad you've come to that realization, I replied, stepping back. But I don't need you to apologize. I've already moved on. I didn't feel any bitterness as I spoke those words. I felt free. The weight that had once been there, the weight of needing their approval, needing their recognition was gone. I was here now because I had earned my place, not because they'd allowed me to be here. As I looked around the room, I saw the others watching, some uncomfortable, others uncertain, but no one dared to approach me now. They had expected me to be the same old Chloe, the girl who would shrink under the weight of their disapproval. But that girl was long gone. I didn't need them to understand my journey. I didn't need them to have done to it. I was more than their expectations. I was more than their approval. And that was enough. 2 years had passed since that night, and life had shifted in ways I hadn't anticipated. Time had a way of healing old wounds, but it also had a way of making you realize just how much you've grown without even noticing. I still think back to that wedding from time to time, the exact moment when everything changed. It was a turning point, not just for how others saw me, but for how I saw myself. The confidence that radiated from that night wasn't something I could have fabricated. It came from years of quiet resilience, from proving my worth to myself rather than anyone else. The small gestures of change from my family continued, but there was no rush to embrace them. Leah had become more open with me, occasionally sending me texts about her own challenges and asking for advice. Ethan, well, he was still trying to figure out how to handle the version of me he'd never really understood. He had apologized once, and though I didn't need it, I could see the sincerity in his eyes. He respected the woman I had become, but I wasn't interested in revisiting our past. I had learned that you can't revisit what's already been let go. I still had moments of quiet reflection, those times when I would sit by myself, looking out over the city or walking through the park, feeling that deep, quiet peace that had come with truly understanding myself. I was no longer waiting for validation, no longer seeking to prove anything to anyone. The world I had once felt excluded from, I now realized was a world I didn't need approval from to exist in. I had already claimed my place, and the work I had put into building a career I was proud of, into creating a life that made me happy, those things were the rewards I gave myself, the rewards that were earned, not given. Every now and then, I'd find myself in a familiar setting, a party, or a gathering with people who once would have made me feel like I didn't belong. But now I walked into those rooms with a different energy. I didn't need their approval or even their acknowledgement. I no longer needed to prove I was enough. I just was. It wasn't about standing on a pedestal and shouting my worth. It was about quietly, firmly knowing my place in the world without needing anyone to say, "You made it." I often reflect on how far I've come from that quiet, overlooked girl. It wasn't the cars or the clothes or the money that made the difference. It was realizing I was already everything I needed to be. I stopped looking for validation outside of myself. And once I stopped seeking it, the rest of the world had no choice but to notice. Not because I demanded it, but because I finally recognized my own strength. To anyone still waiting for validation, for approval, for that moment when someone else will finally see your worth, let me tell you this, it starts with you. You have to see it for yourself first. And once you do, nothing will feel the same. And when you stand in the light of your own truth, you won't need anyone to recognize it, because you'll already know that you're everything you need to be.